I'm Daryl Owens. Welcome to A World of Difference. Recently, Comic Book Resources, a popular outlet for comics industry news, released its ranking of the 20 best superpowers of all time. The list included the usual suspects: super strength, X-ray vision, flight. One that didn't crack the list was dyslexia. And of course, dyslexia is far more common than heat vision, considering between 5 to 10% of Americans live with signs such as slow reading, difficulty spelling, or mixing up words. The severity differs for everyone, and dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence. Children diagnosed with dyslexia can get into college and live abundant lives, especially when they learn to harness the creativity and novel thinking that entrepreneurial superheroes like Shark Tank's Daymond John, who has dyslexia, consider their superpower. On this episode, you'll hear about dyslexia from individuals and families from around the country who've learned to thrive with it during our In the Know segment. Next, our national panel of experts will provide advice on how families can empower children who have dyslexia during our Ask the Experts conversation. Later, you'll meet our latest difference maker, a Florida mother whose advocacy for her son with dyslexia morphed into a worldwide mission to equip parents and educators to decode dyslexia. But first, Health Day news anchor and A World of Difference special correspondent, Daymond John, takes a closer look at dyslexia.
Learning to read and spell can be a struggle for students with dyslexia. Dyslexia may cause you to think or learn differently than other students because your brain processes information in a unique way. While reading and spelling may be a challenge for the dyslexic brain, many people with dyslexia find that they have above average strengths in other areas. Meet 20-year-old Brody Mandelbaum, a junior studying economics at the University of Florida. Brody's a member of the National Center for Learning Disabilities Young Adult Leadership Council.
So I think a lot of people with dyslexia would probably attest to being a little bit more creative and a little bit more, I would say, resourceful when they come to different problems. And I think that what especially adds to that added creativity is that if when you were younger, you ran into a lot of issues learning to read, you have a great amount of experience with failure. And so you're really not worried about trying different, a bunch of solutions out and trying to find something that works.
And finding those different solutions can foster greater resilience and determination, and maybe even some additional superpowers.
I think of dyslexia as more of a resource to me instead of like pretend like it's a Avengers thing and there is a bad guy and a good guy. I think of it sort of when I was younger, I used to think it was a terrible resource and like it was a bad guy to me. But now that I'm older and I know how to use it, it's more the bad guys turned into a superhero and it's more useful.
9-year-old Tristan Martin attends the Michigan Dyslexia Institute in East Lansing, in addition to her elementary school. Her mom, Nicole, shares what she thinks are Tristan's greatest strengths.
It's really her willingness to try. She is, I think, overly committed to pleasing other people. She is an extremely empathetic person, and she wants to please people. And so it doesn't matter how many drills or how many teachers or how many pull-out sessions or how many push-in sessions she has at school. She wants to succeed. And she's had a lot of success with that.
That was certainly what educator Corey Ziltra found with her child. Corey is an expert in the field of learning differences and dyslexia, and her dyslexic son, a university student in Canada, showed exceptional creative talents from a young age.
my son has an incredible talent with anything visual spatial related. He's always been very strong with being able to fix things, create things, build things with his hands. And I would say that would be his superpower. That's something that he's able to do in a way that is well beyond what his peers might do or what other kids might do.
For the parents and guardians of young people with dyslexia, college student Brody Mandelbaum urged patience, acceptance, and support.
I think that it's very easy to kind of think about fixing your kid or about trying to have your kid, as a parent, you want your kid to kind of be the best. You want to give them the resources that they need. And I think that you can, but I think that it's very concerning when you don't see your child growing at a linear pace. And for a dyslexic student, that's just not going to happen. You're not going to grow linearly, but at the same time, then at a certain point, you'll grow exponentially. And so understanding that it'll be slow for now, but I mean, I graduated salutatorian in my high school, and I really have done very well in college. And so I think that you can kind of see that things do even out eventually. But at first it is a little bit stressful. I think just kind of being there for your child is the most important thing, especially as they get aggravated with school. I think that it's important to really frame things in a very positive way and try to find other outlets intellectually for your child that maybe don't relate to things that are school related, so they can still learn to enjoy reading outside of kind of a scholastic context.
And just in case you needed any further reassurance that dyslexia shouldn't be thought of as a disadvantage,
Don't think of it as like don't think of it as like a terrible thing. Think of it as like a superhero power that you can't get rid of it. It stays with you for the rest of your life, but you can use it as a resource to yourself and they can help you with your learning, and you don't have to tear yourself up because you don't, because you want to get rid of it. You can keep it going, and you're going to have it be a resource, and might feel terrible to you when you figure out that you have it, but if you get used to it and but it feels like it'll feel much really good.
I'm Daymond John for A World of Difference.
Thanks, Mabel. Now for strategies and advice to empower your child with dyslexia, we turn to the experts. Jen Birch, a former molecular biologist, is a reading remediation specialist for the dyslexia resource at the Skank School in Atlanta, Georgia, working to remediate students in an underserved public school in Atlanta. Rosemary DeJarnette is a professor of reading and literacy at Beacon College in Leesburg, Florida. Dr. Dennis Eastman is Director of Secondary Education at Biola University in La Mirada, California, a former high school principal and the father of 5 children who have learning needs, including 3 with severe dyslexia. And last but not least, Dr. Nicole Tetro is a neuroscientist who specializes in neurodevelopment in neurodegenerative disorders. She's the author of Insight into a Bright Mind, a neuroscientist's personal stories of unique thinking. Well, let's start this conversation with Jen. I imagine that parents often assume that teachers are equipped to handle whatever comes their way. But in general, are most educational professionals trained to accurately identify and support dyslexic learners?
So I think teachers nowadays have a lot to be responsible for. Unfortunately, most pre-service training programs don't provide for any instruction in dyslexia or language-based learning disorders. I think that there's a lot of myths and misconceptions out there that parents really have to be aware of, and then teach their teachers that, it's not a vision problem. It's not seeing things backwards. It has to do with, how a student is hearing the sounds in the language and being able to manipulate those sounds.
Thank you, Jen. Rosemary, is it important for parents to establish a foundation for reading when they're dealing with kids who have dyslexia?
Absolutely. So the parent's attitude really sets the tone for their student who's going to be kind of navigating their classroom. And so I always like to explain to parents that dyslexia does not just impact a child's reading, how they're looking at the letters in their texts or their novels, that it impacts their comprehension, their grammar, their spoken language. And so it's important that parents can find and recognize their child's strengths. For instance, their spatial reasoning, their creativity, and bring those strengths out while working with some of those areas that might be a challenge. But definitely their attitude towards their child with dyslexia is going to help their child work through that and set the tone.
Thank you, Rosemary. Dr. Eastman, how important is it for parents to work out their own issues about dyslexia and any feelings that they may have that are related to deep-seated beliefs that dyslexia is more disabling than enabling so that they can be calm and empathetic with their children?
Well, the critical factor really here is that parents and guardians recognize that their personal experience with dyslexia is their personal experience with dyslexia. It's not necessarily the same one that their child will be experiencing. My wife and I have 6 children, 5 of which have learning needs and 3 have severe dyslexia, and it looks different in all of them. And yet I didn't suffer from dyslexia, nor did my wife. And what we've discovered is that our children have other significant strengths that have come out that have not necessarily been in the area of reading and necessarily lots and lots of memorization, but a lot of other manners and means that we've been able to celebrate with them. So the invisibility of these learning needs, which only seems to appear when text or a piece of paper is in front of them, actually disappears when they're doing other things. And while reading and writing is critical, we've found ways in which we can help build ramps instead of constantly making them take the stairs regarding reading and writing.
Now to you, Dr. Tetro. How important is it for parents to empower kids with information about dyslexia rather than pretending that the differences don't exist or downplaying them?
Well, it's really critical for them to understand that their way of experiencing the world is unique to them. And when we really shift the awareness from a deficit-based model to a strength-based model, children really can learn great skills for self-advocacy and self-determination. And that's really critical when you're thinking about putting the foot forward of saying, look, I'm a great spatial reasoner. I'm really good at being able to have episodic memory. I may need some supports here, like I need audiobooks, or I may need a note taker. And so it's really critical that we shift the awareness to where it creates a positive mind state and they can see their real strengths within their different types of brain wiring and navigating in the world.
Thank you very much for that, Doctor. Now, Jen, I've heard this term tossed about a lot, and I'm not sure what it is. So what is a dyslexia profile, and why is it important for empowering a child with dyslexia?
So when I think of a dyslexia profile, I think of, I refer the parents to the International Dyslexia Association definition of dyslexia. And I think it's important for kids to break apart that definition and to understand it, that it's not something that is their fault or that they're stupid or dumb, or I think that they internalize a lot of those things. But by bringing apart the knowledge, it gives them power. And so the definition is that dyslexia is a specific learning disability that is neurobiological in origin. So it's important for them to know that it is about their brain and how their brain works. And it works a little bit differently than maybe your friend in your classes. And then it's characterized by difficult with accurate and or fluent word recognition and by poor spelling and decoding. And it's not in how they see things, it's in the phonological component, how they can parse apart language and words in general. And it has nothing to do with how smart they are. And so it's important for them to know those things to empower them, that I can learn and I can and do great things despite this problem I have with reading.
All right, thank you, Jen. Rosemarie, I learned to read using phonics years and years ago. I won't tell you how old I am, but that method seems to be devalued in schools today. But can using the phonic alphabet be a critical tool for helping people with dyslexia grasp reading?
So you are right. It is a hot debate topic right now, both in teacher training programs as well as in every classroom. And what we have found is it would be wonderful if there was one magical tool that you could just use that impacted all readers in the same exact way, but that does not exist. What we do know through the International Dyslexia Association and the What Works Clearinghouse is students need structured literacy with explicit instruction. And that does include phonological awareness and phonics, but it also needs to include multisensory resources. It needs to include universal design. So while that traditional phonics piece is still a part of the program, it does need to be multifaceted. It needs to focus on the student's individual skill strength. And we do that through diagnostics that help teachers be able to drive their instruction in the right way. The underlying piece that we need to always remember is that that curriculum also needs to foster a positive attitude and self-esteem, because in the classroom, we sometimes see that our students who have dyslexia have low self-esteem. Every time they're presented with a reading or writing challenge, they're made to feel like they are less than other students. And so we really need to develop that curriculum in our classrooms where it is a curriculum that takes all of those students into consideration, which is really best practices all around.
Thank you, Rose. That's a very important point. Dr. Eastman, speaking of developing, how important is it for parents to help their dyslexic children develop a better working memory?
Well, working memory is like the desktop on your computer. It allows us to grab pieces of information very quickly. And if you saw my desktop right now, you go, it's a wonder you can do anything. But the fact is, many students access this in different ways: visual, auditory, kinesthetic. It's not always through, as was mentioned, a semantic form. Sometimes it's episodic. It's in context. And so working memory has a number of access points that we have to identify our students' strengths and then assist them in going about accessing working memory through these channels. So students with dyslexia who are aware of their strengths can hugely benefit and actually see a great deal of growth in this area. However, they also need intensive and targeted educational intervention in their school experience.
Are there things that parents can do at home to help bolster their memory?
Well, they can, including things like chunking pieces of information, providing written instructions, reducing complex procedures down into much more doable chunks. And then, of course, visual organizers don't always rely on the oral instruction.
Watch the full Ask the Experts segment on our website at awodtv.org if you want to learn more about empowering your dyslexic child. You can also watch or listen on Facebook, YouTube, or on your favorite podcasting platform. Now, for a different read on dyslexia, let's meet our latest difference maker. Jennifer Ford Knopf knew her son Reed was curious and bright, but she also knew he wasn't thriving in school as she had expected. The answer why came 4 years ago with a dyslexia diagnosis. That diagnosis fueled the Orlando mother and practicing attorney's passion to help her son, a passion that mushroomed into a mission to help other kids with dyslexia to thrive. That became the Read Charitable Foundation, a labor of love that seeks to equip educators around the world with the tools to ensure reading is fundamental for all. Senior correspondent Cindy Peterson brings us the story.
We stopped by the home of Jen Knopf, the president and founder of the Read Charitable Foundation, to find out more about how her foundation is helping dyslexic kids receive specialized education.
So the Read Charitable Foundation is a charitable foundation, a public 501c3 that supports literacy for all students with a specific focus on students with dyslexia. And we started back in October of 2019. And our goal at the moment is training teachers in Orton-Gillingham. Orton-Gillingham is considered the gold standard in literacy instruction for all students, and it's vital for dyslexic students.
This training typically costs up to $3,000 per person and was a barrier as to why teachers weren't being trained, but Jen had a mission to make this more affordable through her foundation.
Back in 1997, our legislature created the National Reading Panel. And the goal was to figure out how do we improve reading outcomes for students, because 66% of our nation's fourth graders do not read at grade level, which is a really low standard. And most people don't know that statistic. 20% of that 66% are dyslexic, and those kiddos obviously struggle the most. And it tends to be the families of dyslexic kiddos that advocate for literacy, and we're the ones who find out these statistics because we have no choice if we don't know these things and we can't help our kids.
Jen's son, Reed, was one of these students who was diagnosed with dyslexia. He quickly began losing interest in school, which was a red flag for Jen, so she set out to find out what was going on.
The inspiration for Read Charitable Foundation, of course, is because of my son, who, of course, the foundation is named after. Reed loved going to school. He's a really social kid, a really happy kid, and was happy to go to school with his big sister. But I would say like a month into first grade, it was getting harder and harder to get him to school. It was like harder to get him out of bed. Then he was forgetting things, and we'd have to drive back home. So there was the delay. Then he kind of stopped doing that, and I was getting phone calls every day that he didn't feel good, and it started with headaches and tummy aches. I started to pick up, it was around the same time every day. I'm like, what's going on? And it turned out it was English Language Arts was the class that he was in. So I was asking, but he wasn't saying. Teacher was saying he was lazy, and of course that's, the truth is now I know he was working so hard, but I was really hard on him and really torturing him with sight words and his spelling tests. And finally, like in November of his first grade year, he broke down, and he just said, school is not for me. I wasn't meant to go to school, and Mom, I'm not smart, and everybody makes fun of me and says Reed can't read, and my teacher makes me stand up in front of the class and embarrasses me. Looking back, what they were describing was the definition of dyslexia. The definition of dyslexia, it's much longer, but the shortened version is an unexpected difficulty in learning to read, write, and spell. And it's unexpected because they're so bright. So it was literally what they were saying, like, this is a smart kid, he should be able to read. And the truth was, if they'd known what dyslexia was, it would have been, like, you would have said that out loud and been like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what this is.
With this newfound diagnosis, Jen set out to help her son in any way she could, but the journey was harder than she expected. Sleepless nights followed, and she realized that there are many families that were struggling to find help.
With the diagnosis came the recommendation of Orton-Gillingham, and so immediately I started researching. There was one person qualified at that time, 3.5 years ago, in the Central Florida area within the Academy of Orton Gillingham Practitioners and Educators to actually tutor a child with dyslexia. That was unbelievable because dyslexia impacts 1 in 5. I mean, I remember one day just walking out and sitting on, like in the dark, sitting on the street curb, just like head in my hands, just sobbing, you know, just head between my legs. And I was like, and we're the lucky ones, you know, we're the ones who have a diagnosis. We're the ones who, when you get the diagnosis and they tell you Orton Gillingham, that I could cognitively be able to research and find someone, that I could afford to send Reed to that tutor, that I could quit my job and drive all over God's green earth to do those things and afford Chick-fil-A and, you know, but it didn't feel very lucky. Of course, then I start researching, and the statistics for the non-lucky ones is terrible and completely preventable.
Jen knew something had to be done and organized the Reed Foundation in 2019. The foundation helped train more than 250 teachers in its first year, around 450 teachers in its second year, and continues to grow.
So we've had people reach out to us to get Orton Gillingham trained from every continent except Antarctica. These kids, they're the problem solvers, they're the game changers, they're the innovators, they're the entrepreneurs. Every device, everything that we use on a daily basis, our lighting, our phones, all of it was created by dyslexic and or ADHD brains. The biggest learning disability in a classroom is fear and shame. And so, you know, if a child is sitting there not feeling worthy and capable, and they know that, you know, there is a risk of embarrassment and failure in the classroom, that is going to be the biggest deterrent to them being able to learn.
With A World of Difference, I'm Cindy Peterson.
Thanks, Cindy. And congratulations, Jennifer Ford Knopf, for making a difference. And that does it for this edition of A World of Difference. If you have questions you'd like our experts to tackle, or if you'd love to share your family's story in an upcoming episode, contact us at our website, awodtv.org. I'm Daryl Owens. We'll see you back here next time. You can watch episodes of A World of Difference on the Beacon College Facebook and YouTube channels and on the show's website, awodtv.org. The website also provides tip sheets and other resources for your parenting journey. And you can listen to the show on the go on Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and other popular podcasting platforms. Thank you for watching and supporting A World of Difference.